Hello again, I am Korush Merabi, and this is our third session of Sailbox. I hope that every detail of this virus is resolved so that we can serve you in person. Well, let's move on to new topics, and it's a very short course. The materials we discussed in the last session. Of course, we had given you an exercise regarding the chess piece, and we will start with a ring for the chess piece. I have made a sample for you, but we also want to discuss new content. Many of you might ask why we cannot fully define a spline even if we meticulously provide all necessary distances as well as dimensions right here in front of us. Certainly there is indeed a method available to fully define it. However, we want to try simpler method first. Later, on downline, if time permits circumstances, allow for it we specific style option available. Spline subcategory, wherein complete freedom. Draw unique curve based entirely upon desired curvature preferences. As illustration example, I personally drawn such arc just now. How exactly go about fully defining particular shape? By utilizing this auxiliary axis provided here within our toolkit resources 8th and instance, I able confidently state my intention is specifically directed towards ensuring vertical alignment. I am using smart dimension. First, we give this dimension a value of 50. For example, we say that this angle has, of course, I couldn't click well. Let's select it again. For instance, we say it has an angle of 165 degrees from here to here, and it measures 120.5 degrees. And of course, let's not forget about their length. We can give them dimensions in this way or in that way. It doesn't matter. For example, I choose this one, and let's say it's 16 and a half. As you know, we are currently moving forward visually. If we had a drawing or something we designed ourselves, we would definitely have first drawn it on the canvas and set a series of dimensions that we need to go through together. Of course, in future sessions, God willing, we will also work on a design based on a reference image. Let's set this dimension to 50 with a height of 21. As you can see, our spline has turned black, fully defined, and everything is set and okay. The next thing I really want to do is very good. I also want to draw a circle here, but it didn't fall precisely in the middle. It's important that it is right on this line so that the design is complete. I think this is not bad at all. Now I will go to trim and remove the extra parts, because this is all I wanted to achieve. Of course, this has some features like the same power that is here, which is quite significant. Everything is fully defined. I just need to remember to close all my sketch lines in the side vector. In version 2016 and above, when the sketch is closed, this highlight appears to assure you that everything is complete. Let's do a re-evaluation like this, although I could have added more details if necessary. In the previous sketch, I used to draw this header as well, but now we are doing this in the second sketch. I select this line. What is it? It's actually part of our model, that curve we have here. When I look at it from the front view and I'm in this sketch, I can select it and hit convert. What does convert do? Everything that we selected behind is recognized as a line in this new sketch that we are working on, and it draws it like this. This function is crucial because it ensures that the elements we need are accurately represented, maintaining the integrity of our design. Now I have this until I want to redraw our sketch. Now let's move on to another action like deleting the extra shapes. Removing these unnecessary elements helps to declutter the sketch, making it easier to focus on the essential components. I reset this as well, and now let's re-evolve this. Here, the Merge Results option is always on by default, which combines these two into one. This option is particularly useful in complex designs where multiple elements need to be integrated seamlessly, simplifying the overall structure and making it more cohesive and easier to manage. If I remove this merge, a folder will be created here for me called Solid Bodies, meaning it recognizes this as a body. It recognizes this as another body as well. For now, don't pay attention to the details because, later on, we will be dealing with all parts of the model extensively. Our modeling for this story will be separate. Well, we have drawn this here. Now, I don't exactly remember the precise details, but I feel like the knight, or perhaps the bishop, has a shape somewhat like this here. It's important to note that although we should fully define these shapes to ensure accuracy and precision, we won't do that right now. To save time and streamline our process, I want to cut one of them and utilize the To All But option, which is a feature that allows us to apply changes to all parts except the specified ones, so that it takes this shape from both sides, giving us a form like this. Now it has become very minimal, almost to the point of being simplistic, and we could have created some additional shapes on the edges as well, which we did enough in the previous step where we focused extensively on edge detailing. Let's select this edge and give it a small fillet here, like 3/10 of a unit, which is a subtle rounding that enhances the overall design. Now we have other tasks to do, which will further refine and complete our project. Now, as a single piece, it might not be very interesting, but if there's a whole family set of these, like a knight, a bishop, a king, and pawns, it might perhaps find its own place. Okay, let's go to the ring and give it a quick try. Even the interior part that I had done for you, as you know, this time we want to focus on the rubber part. It's very important for us to practice and execute it as well. Indeed. For example, we have this shape, and I want to create an offset of approximately 5 millimeters from it. I want to close off the end. If it's in an arc shape, it will close in a manner that is curved, and if it's a line, a straight line, will be sufficient for us. Don't forget that, of course. There is no need to draw the center line here because we have a straight line that will rotate around this. But since we have a defined state, we proceed. Now, since this is the beginning of your work, to avoid any mistakes, it's better to draw it by yourself. Later, when you get more skilled, you can select this part when you want to actually perform the revolution. You see, we can all select this so that it rotates around it. Well, for now, our intention is to proceed quickly to the next part. I don't want to spend too much time. I mirror all of this with respect to this line, and I consider this an extrude cut. I can even select true all from that side, or true all both, because this part has interacted with it. Yes, let's go to the silk ruler, pattern direction, which indicates the direction we want to rotate. I can select this I can select this surface because the last command I worked with was this extrude cut. It has automatically selected it here. If it wasn't selected, your tree diagram would shift. You come here and select your extrude cut. One point to pay attention to is that if the number of bodies increases, this part may interact with each other. When I want to execute the command, the body to keep comes up, which essentially indicates that you have a body, where part of it is floating in the air, separated from the other. You need to specify which part you want to keep. You might say, no, keep all of them for me, but of course this shape shouldn't be like that. Sometimes it might even give you an error. Therefore, we choose a reasonable number, like 7. Alright, now let's draw a design around it. Of course, this part has become metallic, so first, let's put something rubbery around it. Now, if we're going to do this, we're not really doing much work right now because it seems like we want to prepare this shape for an animation, or we're doing it to take a render of it and finish our work. It just needs to look okay on the surface. For example, students in industrial design or mechanics shouldn't work this way, and modeling can be much more complex. We can't just draw any line like this. There needs to be a reason and logic behind everything. Maybe we're only doing this for appearance to strengthen our modeling skills. We drew something like this here, and I have a connection to a counterpart. I hit the reward and ask if I want it to merge into the cycle. I say no, because I want this tire to remain separate, and then I apply a fillet to the edges to make it look a bit more natural. And of course, we need to think about these areas, but for now, it doesn't matter. So how did we say we create that feature? Here you can do a few things. One is to draw the shape in this top view, or you can create a new page up here. We haven't learned how to create a page together yet. So for now, I will work on that top page. For example, I will draw a shape like this, just to remember to bring these back to the closed sketches. This process involves carefully considering the dimensions and proportions of the shape, ensuring that each line and curve is precisely placed to achieve the desired outcome. Let me evaluate and create them. So I drew something like this here. You can see that this sketch has been created on this page. How can I influence this? Pay close attention to this part, as it can be very useful for us. First, if we want it to be prominent, we need to use the extrude command to make these teeth stick out. For example, if I remove the extrude, if you pay attention, if I want to bring this up in a similar way, I want to place something like this here, meaning it should come out from this to something like that. Okay, it only affected this part. Even if we remove the merge, it has distorted our shape. It's just this part. Yes, it's not bad, but it's not what we wanted. However, this part has become very awkward. Well, there is a way. What can you do? You can go back to this sketch that we drew here. We can say in the frame section, it asks me where to start from. I say from that page, and it says, no, please start from the surface or page that I tell you. So I say, okay, tell me. I say from here, and it says, okay, so I will start from here and go up 252. I say, no, that's too much, just 1 millimeter, for example. Now let's see what the difference is with the previous one. As you can see, there is an arc here that corresponds to the same arc that started from the surface, making the work much more natural for the alter. Now we say, for example, 1.5 millimeters. This is one method we can use to complete our work. Here, nothing else is involved. The merge option should be on, and we say it should be on so that these pieces are together. There are other methods as well. Now, if we imagine that we want to create this indentation, we should definitely use extraction cuts. We would say that it should start from the surface, and this time it is going inward. You might create a very thin layer here with the extraction cutter, but a very fine shell might also form here. Sometimes when the students practice, this happens to them. I suggest you activate the direction around it. For example, if you say to cut this extraction, cut up by a certain number of millimeters, there is definitely nothing here. The point is just those thin layers that might be created here, which can also be cleaned up for you. Now, for example, we have created this shape, and we move on to the circular pattern. The extraction cut is also specified here. Now it remains to determine the number. Of course, all of this is in equal spacing. If we say to create one for every 15 degrees, or we can say, for example, how far it has gone at 10 degrees, if 22 rays are created, there's not much to do here. It seems that everyone is equally expecting. Right now, it's better for us to see how high the number can go. It might be more natural, but be warned that depending on your RAM and hard drive, your computer might slow down because all of this is ultimately very resource intensive. They are creating a new page, and I have created 56 of them. You can see that the loading has come up to complete the task. This form has been done for me. Even though I chose a very simple pattern, you can use more complex patterns to make the work more attractive and realistic. We haven't forgotten about the revolve cut. We can revolve these two rectangles that I drew around this part. By the way, let me explain why I added this. The revolve cut here has two lines, for example, placed next to it. Well, this is the new lesson, of course. I don't remember if I told you that you can also make that flower pot. I think I mentioned 3 handles, because this is always our revolve cut. We have reviewed the previous lessons a lot, and the new lesson remains the same. How much time has passed since the video? Well, we have time. It doesn't matter because this part is also important. It is necessary to tell you that the exercises we give you include new lessons, and it is better that you definitely complete the work, because that is my goal. Let's imagine that this flower pot is ours, and it is supposed to be hollow. I have chosen this 0 to be hollow. Well, we wanted to create a flower pot with 3 handles. How many types of handles can we create for this? The first method I want to use is the extraction cut. Let's have this on the front surface. We will create something like this here. Moving to the center, let's offset it to this side. For example, like this handle. Let's pull this a bit. Let's define its form. It doesn't matter, you know. In this way, I might not be able to redraw all these lines, but what can I do? I can actually select this IJ and hit convert, and it will create all these lines for me as a sketch. We only have a circuit of extra lines that the trim tool can handle. And we see in this particular area, of course this specific area, that the highlights have been carefully itemized as if everything is absolutely okay. Now I see that I certainly want to put a sketch outside of the main command to give it a feature to protrude outward from the page. For example, 5 mm has an issue. What is that particular issue? As we are currently seeing the problematic thickness error of the page. If I didn't explain the thickness error to you, let me clarify that we often deal with this error. Of course, if I remove the merge option now, this error will disappear. But the overall shape is not interesting at all. As you can see, it seems that our handle is open from this part. Even if we increase the thickness, you will see that it becomes much more obvious that this method is not correct. Of course, if we just want to get it working, we have a trick for that, which is that when we see the thickness here, we can carefully remove this coincident option that is sticking this together, move this slightly a bit inside the meat of our vase, and also do the work for the bottom in this way, precisely. Well, the error. This part is extra. These two weren't sticking together, so I said this point should merge with that point. This option had come up, but now that we've turned off the merge option, we can see that this has gone into your meat. Now, another mistake has occurred from this, but the formal one has been corrected. But when we look from the inside, it's not interesting. I'm going to turn on the merge option now. What happened is that the thickness error is no longer created for me, and instead I see that since these have merged into one piece, it seems like this has popped out from the side, and from here there are no more issues. Of course, look at this from the current view. If we observe it, this handle is completely in an extruded and straight form. Well, this is one type. If your design is really like this, you can use it. But we said there are right and wrong methods. Now let's test another method together. Even this shape, we still took it into the meat. Let's draw a line here using the revolve tool. Well, this shouldn't be a hasty decision. Instead of 360 degrees, I set it to, for example, 15 degrees. Instead of the blind mode, I again select the field to create it from the center. Now, if we don't have that problem again, what is the only flaw? It's that the end of the handle has become wider towards the front, which is due to the revolve movement it's making, but this is still a method for making handles. Of course, I should tell you that the best method for this work is the swipe movement, which allows you to truly create and design the handle you want. At that point, it won't be a two-step process anymore. Today, we want to work on the swipe together, but first I want to show you how we could have 3 handles, because I think by now you understand that if the number is 56, we set the number to 3. In this way, I just want to explain to you that if you happen to have not turned on the merge handle and in fact, it has come as a separate part, which is not actually a separate body, then when you want to replicate the pattern, it will be introduced as such. You shouldn't select the feature here, because this is no longer a feature. It has been defined as a body. Let's definitely try this out as a feature. I want to select this, and as you can see, it gives us an error. Not an error, but it actually says it's not acceptable and should be selected as a body because it is a body itself. Yes, I will. Exit the feature mode and go to the body section to say please pattern this body and copy it in this way. Now, let's move on to the new lesson, which is about sweep. A lot can be done with sweep, but first, let's see what it is. On my top page, I will draw a line like this, following this path. And in the next sketch, for example, on the front plane, which is exactly perpendicular to our top plane, I say that I want to draw a sketch like this, a circle. Now I go into the features, and instead of using extrude, I know to go for sweep. It says, what is your profile? I actually say this. It asks, what is the path? We say, this is it. When these two are selected, it creates this circle along this path for you. It gives it a shape, and it is definitely very simplified. Now, let me just even delete the sweep command and come back here. Now, let's imagine that this circle is slightly off to the side, meaning these two are not overlapping. If we apply the sweep now, what will happen? It says the starting point is here, and the path continues from where the starting point is. We have several options, and if we want to explain them to you, in the options section, the follow post means it is following our path. If I set this state to keep normal, what is the difference? This circle appears on our front page, and as it goes up, it wants to keep that same circle on the same page for me. For this reason, since it has gone into this arc, my shape becomes thinner. And in the end, you can see that it is still continuing on that same page to where it will rotate. It is going straight along that path. Now I will press it again so you can see the difference. Here, if we look at the shape, we see that due to its properties, our shape has also changed. There is also a very cool functional part called profile twist that takes the shape and rotates it. It can be in degrees, radius, or revolution, where we can specify how many times we want it to revolve around this path, whether it's 2, 3, 4 times. Only if the number of turns goes too high, our shape must inevitably deform to fit along this path. I think the number 5 would be cool for it. Let's go with that. This has also been somewhat deformed to follow this path, meaning that as it follows this path, it also twists around like a telephone wire or some strange shape. We can create models that come to your mind, but for now, we don't want to do those movements for our lesson today. Instead, we want to create something like an electronic device, such as a mobile charger and we can use the sweep to model its cable. Let me briefly explain something important to you. Instead of just using a simple sketch, we want to use a more complex 3D sketch. What exactly is a 3D sketch? Our traditional sketch was always meant to be done on a single flat plane, but in a 3D sketch, you can actually utilize the entire three-dimensional space. For example, when I pick up a line, a very important point to note is that next to that tool, you see an X and Y. What do these X and Y mean? Here, please note that X and Y indicate that these yellow lines are meant to be drawn on that specific X and Y plane. I drew it, and by pressing the Tab key, it became visible to us. Now, if you look here, you can visualize that the plane has changed. I press Tab again, and the space changes once again. I keep pressing Tab and drawing lines. The line of sight becomes clear for us here. Now understand that we have drawn something like this, but if I rotate it, we can actually see that. This is done in space on various planes. In that first look we had, we saw those graffiti kids doing some work on the ground and walls. You might think there is a three-dimensional volume on the ground, but in reality, they use this technique to create an optical illusion. Some of the kids ask why, when we hit the tab, these pages don't change. Sometimes it happens, maybe because of the software crack. If you see that no matter what you do, it doesn't get fixed, close the silent box, and then reopen it. If you save the work you're doing, close the silent box, and then open it again, hopefully it will work. Well, let's have patience. For example, I draw a boundary like this here to clearly demonstrate in this particular spot. When I exit the sketch, pay attention to this. If your 3D sketch is selected, you will see that its color is blue. If I click on the 3D sketch again, it will edit the same 3D sketch for me and will not open a new one. Be mindful of this because, for example, if I want to come here and draw a circle as per our usual routine, then I want to sweep and say, this is my section, this is my path. Here, you will see what happens. It will no longer confirm this. A page will open for you that is called the Selection Manager. You can even right-click here to bring up the Selection Manager, which actually should be understood as the silent box, where I confirm this circle as a sketch. Now I will bring up the Selection Manager again and define this as my path. Even now, it hasn't given a preview to avoid any issues for you. I recommend that even in the future, as we become more advanced, we will align these for each other. I kindly ask you to do this for each other. You should do this in separate sketches, meaning that once this task is completed, I can say, for example, I want to have this circle on the front page. You see, this is one sketch, and this is another sketch. Now let's move on to our sweep. I can confidently say this circle. You see, there is no question from us, because it knows that there is nothing else besides this, and my path is this. Of course, let me explain that we might not be limited to a circle. For example, it could be a square, or a polygon. We know how to create a rectangle, centered in this way. In fact, we have something called a polygon, and here it is drawn in a polygonal shape, but it is not actually polygonal. You can select any number of sides you want here. For instance, if you choose 7 sides, it will create a heptagon for us. Or you can convert it to a pentagon, quadrilateral, triangle, or even a line if you want. We can do whatever we like with the number of sides. For example, I can say I want a 4-sided shape in the form of a diamond. This becomes your profile. You might even create a strange shape with spline, and that becomes your profile. That's perfectly fine and has no effect. This will be our path. Okay. Now, I wanted to tell you this. If your profile is circular, you don't need to draw those circles. The sweep option has a feature called Circular Profile that you can select. You see, it won't ask you about the profile anymore. You just tell it, "This is my path," and it will say, "I'll create it in a circular shape with the correct end." For a circular profile, just tell it how big the radius should be. You see, once a number is accepted from one side, it doesn't get accepted from another, due to these circles becoming so large that our shape encounters problems. They enter because of this part. It should be there, even if I set it to 200. And Z, it will accept it. If it goes beyond that, these parts will collide with each other, and the shape will become very acceptable. Now, the paths that use spline are more noticeable due to their distinct and smooth curves, which stand out clearly against other elements. Just to test it and ensure everything is functioning as expected, you can see that we go back to the 3D sketch environment, where I carefully select the spline tool from the toolbar. This allows us to observe the changes and confirm the enhancements made. When you use the spline in its normal default state, you can manipulate and adjust it in space with these specific handle tools, because we are no longer just in the regular sketch environment. Instead, we are actually operating in a 3D space. Is that okay with you? Let's move on to the sweep operation with a circular profile. We don't have a problem here at this stage, but if our profile keeps getting larger and larger, there might come a point where this arc could twist or distort. However, if our wire is thick enough, you can clearly see that it has a bend here and is processing a lot to complete the task efficiently. For example, if I set it to 200, let's wait a bit for the CPU processing to finish its task. Yes, it's doing it now. Now, let's see the shape. I can confirm that this is indeed the shape, but it's definitely not what I'm looking for or expecting. It just kindly executed the operation, and we accepted it. But this is certainly not what I was after or intended. What I want to explain to you is that you might have a very extremely sharp screw, for example, like this one. For instance, let's take a look once again. Approximately 10 millimeters is incredibly small that it passes through this screw. If we set it to 10, when it begins analyzing, there might possibly be a potential issue that could arise. You can observe the curvature is exceptionally large that it is unable to twist along that particular path. In the previous versions, when I was working with the software SolidWorks, it would not even confirm that. But now, if it is performing this action, then the shape is absolutely not what I desire, and it will certainly deform in this specific manner to be capable of twisting in that particular screw. So let us create a suitable and proper shape, and accurately model it using this Tilly sketch and sweep tool. I will start from the coordinate center and draw a line right here. Then I want to proceed along the y-axis and advance forward along the z-axis. Next, I want to move up in a gradual and deliberate manner along the y-axis, and then separately, sequentially, and methodically along the x-axis, and actually go this way, along the z-axis to create a structure, essentially a chair. In this way, let's just give them a little size so that the work is neat and tidy. This size should be 200 millimeters in width, and this size should be 300 millimeters in height. To ensure everything is perfectly aligned and organized, we need to be precise with the measurements. This precision will help maintain the overall quality and appearance of the work. The numbers are completely random, but if we want to work properly, the dimensions should also adhere to ergonomic standards and other requirements. The height should be approximately 500 millimeters, and this should be 220 millimeters. In fact, I am currently modeling something like this here. Now that my work is done, I have designed half of the extrusion of the chair, but let's add some fillets to make it look a bit nicer. I want to add fillets of about 40. I think that would be good. Yes, here, 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 and one more here. Thank you. Now let's move on to the sweep. I want it to have a circular shape, and the path should be taken at a thickness of 25. So we have something like this here. Usually for symmetrical shapes, we draw half of them and mirror the rest. Of course, it depends on your modeling skills. You might find it easier to draw the whole thing. Each modeling process has its own tricks with different software. For example, it might be easier to create a 3D shape with a sweep and fillet. I always like to start by creating from the front view. Some people, for instance, start from the side view. It's all experiential. We take the fillet and want to apply it relative to this plane. It's correct that the whole thing is a sweep. We can use the feature for that, or we know that there is also a body involved, and I can use the body as well. It doesn't make a difference. So what happened? A shape like this was created, and since the merge option was self-evident, these two were combined at once. This process is crucial in ensuring that the design is seamless and efficient. We often need to refer back to this, as it serves as a foundational step in our design process. But now, what should we do about the upholstery and such? Let's make it look cooler and more aesthetically pleasing. We choose a front panel to create a covering for the chair's seating area, which is an essential part of the overall design. I select the front panel and sketch it meticulously. Here, I draw a circle relative to the profile we have and create a center line in the middle, ensuring precision and accuracy. Now, using the spline tool, I draw a line from here. Before that, I need to make this spline perpendicular to this line, because later I want to mirror it relative to this line, ensuring that it is definitely perpendicular so that the line continues smoothly in that direction, and that this spline and this circle are congruent. This step is vital for maintaining symmetry and balance in the design. I want to do this using the center line, which acts as a guide for achieving the desired alignment and coherence in the final product. Here, I want to draw something a bit higher, or slightly higher, because I want to trim it slightly. Indeed. In fact, There is a leather cover that has wrapped around here and has gone to the end. Why did I stop here? Because we usually need to apply a bit more tolerance, although we are currently doing a lot. We are currently working in a schematic mode, which is not very professional for modeling practice. Now I will reflect all of this. Of course, I was allowed to select the mirror first, and then since there is a central line here, it would be better to mirror these based on that. This is the mirrored shape. Now you might say that this sketch is not closed, so you want to extrude it, and you are right. Therefore, an option becomes available here called Thin Feature, which tells me that I can give it a thickness as if the material itself has been offset from it. It asks me what thickness I want: 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters, 3 millimeters. You can see that its thickness is increasing. Now, I think 1.5 millimeters will be enough, just outward or inward. You see, from this line going up, or inward, since I made it very close to the rod, I say outward. But where did it start? From that front plane, which is unacceptable here. Remember that we were allowed to say to start the extrusion from a specific plane that I introduced to you. The last option, the offset option, tells us to move 70 millimeters forward, parallel to the same front plane that I started from, effectively starting from the sketch. Now I will perform my extrusion. For example, let's think that I will move this a bit further back. I think it wouldn't be bad to remove the two 10 merge options, so that this is a different material, essentially a completely different body, which will have a much better format when we want to render it later. It's absolutely true that there's a line here, but this line is merely schematic. If we closely look at it in shaded mode, we can clearly see that no angles or anything else have been created there that would ruin my intended shape. We definitely want to do the same movement for the back as well. I carefully select the top face and look from above. Now I will meticulously draw my sketch and see precisely where the center of this circle is. I will draw a circle like this, and I will also align the center line here. And we can completely change its shape. Let's draw it in a different way. For example, it has come straight from here, and by doing so, we can explore various possibilities and perspectives. This approach allows us to see things from a new angle. And now I'm going to make these two lines tangent to each other right here, ensuring they touch at exactly one point, and this line tangent to this other line, maintaining the same condition. Now, what I want to do might be a bit interesting, because it involves a unique approach. So I'll carefully place this here, aligning it precisely, and now I want to make this line, and this line interact in a way that I will reflect this line that passes through the central point of this circle. Now then, using trim functionality, I will eliminate this part completely. Perhaps by now you have understood exactly what it is I want to do here. First of all, let's select the entire object in its entirety and mirror it based on precisely this line. Now then, it's true indeed that at present moment, this represents a closed sketch. And if I click on extrude right now, it will extrude into a shape like such as shown here. However, though, at this particular juncture in time, the option labeled as thin feature can actually be turned on for us. In its previous state, before any modifications were made whatsoever, it was always off, meaning you couldn't use it because your sketch initially had no end. It wasn't closed properly in any way whatsoever. Now finally, I shall bring these elements back into play once more. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, I make one thicker, so much so that ultimately it becomes just slightly closer towards aligning with respect towards proximity near unto this rod. We will use AftZat instead of the sketch page again and go up. Maybe it wouldn't be bad to just raise it this much. Perhaps it would make it look a bit nicer overall. Just a little. I will remove the merge option, which means I actually have three bodies: the structure, the lower mill, and this support. What's the difference between this one and the previous one? The previous one is wrapped and glued, while this one has a rubbery state. We forced it inside. Even if we want our shape to be a bit more refined, it's better to place a screw or something similar here. I want to give you an educational tip. If I want to create a hole here from this view and the side view, these two holes should be equal. Let's actually cut this out together from both sides. Now notice that in the default state, the selected body is highlighted, or in the all body state, it selects the entire object for me. Well, that's not what I want. I want to edit it in body mode. So I will say, please only affect this object, this body of ours, because removing the merge creates another body. It doesn't interfere with our work, so these holes are created now just for our rod. In fact, if I remove this and hide it, you'll see that only the hole for our rod has been created. But now that this hole has been made, I look and see that this rod was actually solid, not a profile. It was actually a solid rod, and usually such a situation doesn't occur. They don't use a completely solid rod. So, what should I do next? I will delete the extrude cut I made earlier. Before that, I will select the shell option. Now that I have three bodies, this option has been created for me, asking which body you want to apply the shell to. I say this body that you see here, or I can select it using the tree view here. When I hover over it, it turns orange, indicating that I want this iron profile to be my body. Do you want to remove its face? No. I just want a thickness of 1 millimeter. We say 1 millimeter or 2 millimeters. Let's say 2 millimeters. Now this profile has holes created in it, meaning it has been hollowed out. Now if I come and actually extrude this sketch we have here and cut it from both sides, we can see the difference. You can see that these areas are no longer solid. We used the profile in a loose manner. We haven't done anything specific for the vase yet, but we will do it on this. This is from the height, and when we click on this spring, it goes back. I will take it out again, come to the right page, and select it again. I went this way so you can see that we can now see the hidden lines, and say that these two circles you see here I selected them with Control and clicked on Convert to get those two back. But what's the difference? I also want to perform the export cut. So let's make this shape visible again. I want to start it. For example, it should only just possibly affect this from here. There is no more work to be done on the rod, only this exhaust cut is going to be done. On this part, whether it's leather or the back. Let's take a careful look at this situation. We can also thoroughly perform the same operation on the lower part. Remember that we can mirror this as well in the process. Fortunately, the panel is positioned exactly in the center, and I will mirror it and say that the last feature I did is this exhaust cut. Please mirror it relative to the right panel, because it was a side view feature. It definitely needs to be a panel selection, not just any two-dimensional state. Many people ask questions, so be careful when I want to mirror a three-dimensional object. There must be another panel present to perform this action relative to one panel. Now here, of course, let's also put a pin or screw so that the side view has a book-like structure with plenty of screws and pins and little things. But for now, we won't delve into that until the future. I think that's enough for this session. I ask you to prepare a lampshade for the next session that includes the exhaust cut, revalve, and sweep. How so? We have a lampshade that, like your vase, goes up into a round form with a lamp inside it, which you actually create using that feature, the revalve. This message says, "Have you been working for 20 minutes on the earwax? I even went around a bit and you haven't styled your file." This is a good message. I must remember to style your file because if the power goes out and the unsaved work is lost, it would be a disaster. Of course, there is a recovery method, but we'll address that in the future. Now, I want a lampshade that has a lamp, depending on the detail you use, so you can experience it yourself. I want to create a wire for this lampshade. This wire comes out from a point that connects to a plug, and the plug definitely needs to be made with an exhaust cut, which has two prongs that fit into the socket. Just be careful that the wire, let's assume our lampshade's wire is the one you want to work with, is definitely a three-dimensional one. Make sure to position it in such a way that it doesn't end up like this. Because let's assume there is a ground surface here. If our wire goes down from the ground level, then tomorrow when we want to render, it will look like the wire has gone into the carpet and come back up. Create a rail-like structure for it, so that the wire comes up. We can do something like drawing a helper line here, for example, to indicate that this is my ground level. Later, this will have a certain thickness, so it first goes down to this point where it touches the ground due to the wire's upward movement, but then it starts going back down. The wire's shape, as you can see, should be adjusted accordingly. Now, to make it a bit more mysterious, I will sketch it in a tilted manner with a column. For example, it comes out like this. I say, well, at first it comes here. Our imaginary line hits the ground. Then it goes up a bit, so that you can work a little easier with these handlings. You can right-click in this part of the show sketch. Triad. My language skills are not great, so I might mispronounce some terms. You can use these arrows to ensure that your alignment is absolutely and entirely correct along the X, Y, and Z axes. Now, if I draw a guideline here, for example, it has a flaw. Your alignment should definitely be higher, and it shouldn't stay this high from this angle. It's better to just focus on the point. It might be a bit challenging to work on. We give you this action so that you can get a bit of practice. Well, up to this point, it's not bad. Now, this part remains. Of course, I didn't pay much attention to it when I was drawing it at first. I encountered some issues with that work, and it ends up coming here. These handlings allow us to presume that, for example, it will come out at a right angle at first, such as in the beginning, but it certainly, and without a doubt, has to be in this specific manner. Now, hypothetically speaking, let's assume that this happens. Once our work is completely finished, we will then return to this initial introduction and proceed to carefully create the necessary protrusion. Let's set this aside so I can permanently and completely delete it, so our shape doesn't start off incorrectly. If we look at the wire, it doesn't look authentically and genuinely realistic at all. It's very highly improbable for a wire to be in this position. These parts should absolutely, certainly, and definitely be laid down. But I want to tell you that in the end, this shape here might look a bit off, but that's okay because we know how to see the plane. You can draw a shape like this, and then cut this part off, which is quite important and necessary. Now I will select this surface and say I want to sketch here, which can be in any form or shape you like. I will do it very hastily and quickly. Then, 2 branches will come out of it, but surely after a while, the shape will be a bit more professional and refined. We can create a screw, for example, to make it look a bit nicer, more aligned, and aesthetically pleasing. In fact, this exercise can bring us back to our course, our revolute and sweep techniques that we learned today. Thank you, and see you in the next session.